Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. This is Dumpster Cat. In this one, we're going to be furthering our exploration of BGX midrange in Pioneer, and this will be the first video of a series of, I hope, very many videos where we take a very detailed look at certain matches and certain matchups that we have in the Pioneer format for our beloved black-green midrange Golgari midrange deck that we have in front of us. This one we will be playing against blue-black control, and so I hope you enjoy the video. Now, just a quick overview of the deck. We do have 2 Trespasser, 3 of the Veil, 1 the Last Hope, 1 Murderous Rider, and then everybody's most hated card except for me, Tireless Tracker, playing a 3-of here alongside 2 Kalidas, and then testing out some Deathrite Shamans and 1 Sleeper. And then of course the 4 Siphoners that I've been on lately. I do think this is a really good card. It's been very nice in the midrange and control matchups. Not so great in the aggro matchups, but you could easily side it out for some more removal on the side. And so I've been really liking this archetype lately, and I'll see you for the match. Alright, we're here for the match. Again, this is going to be a very informative video, so if you're not too interested in that, I would advise you either to click off the video or, trust the process, and I hope you could learn something from this video. So let's get into the game. So we have a pretty nice opening hand. Obviously going blind against the opponent right now. Very nice mix of spells and lands. We have the decay for removal. We have some nice early on pressure with the Shaman and Siphoner, and then some late game bombs with or in the form of Kalidas. And so we'll obviously lead on our turn and play in the form of Shaman. They'll play a Watery Grave, which is a bit uncommon in Pioneer right now. Mainly just means blue-black control. And so at this point I was pretty sure that I was against a control deck, as very few decks do play Watery Grave. So here we'll just run out the Siphoner and then attack for 1, get our energy counter. And then our opponent will just play a land and pass. So now here, obviously at the beginning of each of your upkeeps, Siphoner is going to trigger, but you can only draw a card off of 2 energy. So we got the trigger, but we're not able to draw. So all we could do this turn is attack for 3 damage, get our extra energy counter. So next turn we could draw an extra card. Drawing the Abrupt Decay was not too ideal there, but it's okay. Our opponent just plays a land and passes. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, they could probably have a counter spell. They're probably less likely to have a removal spell because they probably would have cast it last turn. So we could go ahead with our energy counter here, or expending our 2 energy counters to draw an extra card, pay 1 life, and we see that we draw an extra Fatal Push and an extra Abrupt Decay and then 1 Fatal Push, which is not the best, obviously, in this matchup where our opponent is not going to be playing creatures. However, we just play our land, go to attacks, attack for our 3 damage, get our energy counter, and then get in there. There could be some merit to leaving the Deathrite Shaman behind, just in case our opponent does play a counter spell. It's very likely they have a removal spell, as I said. They could have a cantrip like a Consider. So, I could have held this back, but I thought it was probably just better just to attack, taking into account that the graveyard is empty at the moment. And so now, without any other play, I'm just going to try to put as much pressure onto the board as possible, even though they probably do have a counter spell, and they just play out the Kalidas. And so they do have the Make Disappear, which is probably the best counterspell they could have here. Maybe Sinister Sabotage would have been better with the card selection, but that's alright. And then they play a Castle Vantress, and they have a Soul Shatter for our Siphoner, which is not the biggest deal, taking into account that we did just draw a Trespasser off the top, which was probably one of the best draws we had. We were very light on threats, obviously, with having 4 removal spells against a control deck is not where we want to be at. So we were, I was getting a bit nervous when I saw that Soul Shatter, but fortunately we did draw a creature, so now to play it, we do decide to get rid of our own Kalidas. The only exception, to exiling our own cards or our own creatures out of our graveyard is with Takenuma and Scavenging Ooze, and Liliana's the Last Hope. So we do have to kind of be a bit thoughtful when activating Trespasser on our own creatures. However, in this moment, I just want to apply the most pressure as possible, and so I go with just this route of exiling our own Kalidas to drain them for 1. And then I will not attack with the Deathrite Shaman, now that they do have instants and sorceries in the graveyard that we could use Shaman's ability to drain them for 2. Now, on their turn, they play a Field of Ruin, and then on their second main phase, they decide to cycle up Fetid Pools, and then at this point they just pass the turn. And so on the end step we can get rid of that Soul Shatter, draining them for 2. Now we just draw an Urborg, so not the best. However, because they played no spells last turn, we are able to flip the Trespasser into the Glutton, and so we are able to attack for an extra point of damage, which is pretty relevant here. Same thing, attack with the Trespasser. We're going to exile our own Siphoner just for the maximum amount of damage, and then hold the Shaman back for activation on most likely the end of their next turn. And so here I decided not to play the Urborg, just because we have very cheap spells in our hand. We already have 4 lands in play, which is enough for this deck to function. And so playing the Urborg, it doesn't matter too much to me right now. I'd rather keep it in my hand for added value for Tireless Tracker, and just perhaps information as well. They play a Pathway, cycle a Censor on their turn, and then at this point they just concede. Seems like they perhaps flooded out just a bit. Perhaps they could have activated the Castle Vantress there on the end of my turn instead of cycling the Fetid Pools. Perhaps would have been better, but maybe they were just more worried about not having the Trespasser flip, and they wanted to draw into possibly a spell they could play. But anyways, we got the first game, which is very nice against control, and I'll see you guys for the second game. Okay, so for sideboarding against a control deck, we obviously have some cards that are not going to be very impactful. As we saw, our triple Abrupt Decay just rotted away in our hands, so we're definitely going to be taking those out. Could put those over here for now. We do want to trim some number of Fatal Pushes. For now, I'll just keep 2 out, or 2 in. I do believe that Fatal Push, at least some numbers should stay in, just for the likes of Shark Typhoon and other random creatures that they may have. I do think trophies should stay in. They could have Planeswalkers, they could have the Scarab God. Trophies also great against Hall of Storm Giants and Castle Vantress, so I still like it. And then Kalidas is an iffy one as well, so we could put that in the maybe slot right now. For cards we want to bring in, obviously Duress is very nice. Gargaroth is good as well. Obviously pretty bad against just, counter spells or removal spells, but it's going to be on average better than, say, a Kalidas, so that's why I like having it. Courser is great. I love Garrick, and then we could also bring in a Fine Finality. And so in this matchup, I just took out these 7 basically creature dedicated cards, and then just had the deck like this. I really love Siphoner in the matchup. You could cut out Scooz if you want, but I think Scooz is still pretty important as just having a 2-drop threat that, while it's just a Grizzly Bear most of the time, still having the added pressure is going to be really nice. And so I think just keeping it in for that reason is good. And we do have some pretty good resilience against this matchup as well, with the Siphoners, with the Lilianas, the Trespassers, and then the trackers are very good against them as well. And so here we are for game 2. After sideboarding, feeling even more confident in this matchup, we see this hand, which is only have 2 lands, so right off the bat we have to be very critical of this. However, we do have 2 Siphoners, which is probably one of the our best threats in the matchup right now. So I already like it. We do have some late game bombs in the form of Tracker. We do have a Fatal Push, which is not the best in the matchup, but I still like having it, just in case they do have a Shark Typhoon for a blocker or something like that. So I do end up keeping this hand. Opponent plays a Fetid Pools and passes the turn. We draw a Trespasser, which is great if we do hit our 3rd land drop. And so we just play our Blooming Marsh and pass. They play a Hall of Storm Giants, which is, we have to take note of this, later in the game at least. And then we draw a Thoughtseize, which is pretty nice. So now we have the choice of either playing the Thoughtseize or one of the Siphoners. You may feel like, basically, it's either, do we want to be playing around a removal spell in the form of Fatal Push, or do we want to be playing around any other type of counter spell that we want to be getting out of our opponent's hand with Thoughtseize? Because, although a counterspell would both counter, obviously, a Siphoner and a Thoughtseize, I'd rather have it counter a Thoughtseize, just because having the threats on our board is going to be more impactful. So I read opponent for having perhaps a counterspell here, and so I go with the Siphoner, and it resolves, which is good for us. However, they do end up having a Fatal Push, so not the best, but it's okay. They play a Field of Ruin and then just pass. We thankfully draw our 3rd land, and here, because we drew our 3rd land, we will play our Overgrown Tomb Shocked In, and then we will Thoughtseize the opponent. This plays around Make Disappear, and so we see a hand of just 1 Fatal Push and 4 lands, so obviously we will be taking the Fatal Push, leaving them with 4 lands in hand. Bit of a risky keep for the opponent. Perhaps they kept the 5 land 2 push hand, thinking that they would draw it into more spells, but seemingly they probably just drew into more lands. Perhaps if they kept the Fetid Pools as a cycling card, then that would have been a bit better. But here we're just able to get the 2nd Siphoner out, and I really like having multiple Siphoners in my opening hand, or just with how the game carries out in general, because if one just dies without you being able to attack, the second one that you get is just going to be a Dark Confidant the next turn, because you'll have 2 energy. And so I think, in that sense, Siphoner is going to be really impactful. So they Field of Ruin our Lair of the Hydra. It's perfectly fine. We get a Swamp. They will play a Fabled Passage, which I believe was probably not the best card to play. If they would have played just one of the basics or one of the other lands that we knew about, then I think that would probably be a bit better. But now we just have full information. We're able to untap, draw our extra card with Siphoner. We unfortunately do not hit our 4th land. However, we are just able to attack here, which is very nice. Get our energy counter. And then now we have the choice of Liliana, Tracker, or Trespasser. I don't think leaving up a trophy is very impactful. We just want to pressure the opponent while they don't have the resources available to interact with us. And so I think the best option of going through that, or going down that route, is just by playing the Trespasser. And again, we will exile our own Glint Sleeve Siphoner, just for some added pressure. And although we do have the Liliana to get the Siphoner back if we need to in the future, I still believe just getting that extra point of damage is more impactful at the moment. So they play an island, pass the turn. We do not hit a 4th land, we just draw a Tracker, which is not the best. However, because they did not play any spells last turn, we got to flip our Trespasser yet again. So Siphoner and Trespasser being two big all-stars of this game, or at least this match. We exiled just two of their cards. Perhaps I actually should have exiled both Fatal Pushes. I was thinking of if I drew Deathrite Shaman, then having the Fatal Push in the graveyard would be better for that. But they could be playing Torrential Gearhulk, so probably just getting rid of the Fatal Push there is going to be a bit better. We swing in for 6, we get our second energy counter off the Siphoner, which is very nice. And then here, we have the option of playing either the Tracker or the Liliana. I opt to go for the Liliana, which I feel like I probably should have gone for the Tracker, just for the added pressure. However, I was really worried about them having a Wrath effect. Perhaps I should have played a bit more confidently, though, with us knowing that they just have 3 lands and 1 unknown card in their hand. But I was really scared of a Wrath effect, so I didn't want to play the Tracker. So I just played, went down a bit more of the safer route, where, we have the controlling board, we have the pressure, and if we plus with Liliana on each of our turns, then we're just going to have an alternative win con, where if they do have a Wrath effect in the future turns, then we could still win with Liliana's ultimate ability, or just get the dead creatures back to our hand with her -2. So that's why I went with the Liliana. Doesn't matter too much here because they did just have the counterspell for it, and they surveil the card to the top. So on their turn, they play a swamp. So 2 lands and then 1 unknown in their hand, and then they play an Extinction Event. So obviously they top decked this, so that I guess there is a bit, not too much logic in thinking they did have a Wrath effect in hand last turn when they had 4 cards, 1 unknown. So, it was a bit unlucky that they just top decked the Extinction Event. But, luckily we do have an odd and an even creature, so they just get rid of the Trespasser, which makes sense. But I'm still happy with this because they're at 11, which is relatively low, and then we do get to keep our Siphoner rounds to draw an extra card here because we do have the 2 energy. And here we drew our extra land, which is really nice, and we drew Liliana, which is even better. We know they have the 2 lands in hand, however, so Liliana is probably just not the best here. So we'll start by attacking. Get our energy counter. And then we'll go with the Tracker, because we do know that they have 2 useless cards in hand, so we'll just play the Tracker and then get the clue token thereafter. Tracker also serves as a nice efficient body that could attack our opponent and just increase our clock, which is basically what we want to be doing right now against the control deck when in the early to mid game. So they play their island. They do have Hall mana, which is notable. However, they just drew a Dig Through Time, which is pretty impactful for them. They obviously had to spend 5 mana to cast it, which is not ideal, but Dig Through Time being one of their premier card draw cards is going to be pretty good for them. They immediately cracked the Fabled Passage, so it seems like they drew something. However, they just passed the turn. We know they have 1 land and 2 unknowns in hand. And then on our upkeep, they will eliminate our Tracker. So this disallows us of being able to draw a land and then play the Tracker, or play the land, get the clue activation. So well played from the opponent, good timing there. And then if we had any sort of way of saving the Tracker, then we would have had to use the mana on our turn, so that was correct sequencing from the opponent. We just drew a Courser of Kruphix, which is, I really liked it, but in this scenario, it's not too impactful, knowing that we just want to pressure our opponent as much as possible. And so here I was deciding between, we could go Courser to get more lands, but I thought that was a bit too slow. We could go Tracker. We won't have a clue token thereafter, but perhaps just the added body would be nice. However, I do go with the Liliana for one of two reasons. First off, Liliana is going to be a very hard to get rid of threat compared to, say, a Tireless Tracker. We just saw that they used one of their eliminates, so it's going to be less likely that they have another for Liliana. Obviously, Liliana being a really impactful card in the just matchup as a whole. And so, I play Liliana for that reason, and because I really just want to be attacking their hand right now. If I'm not going to be aggressive, which I feel like just having the threat of Liliana is probably a bit better. However, perhaps I should have just played a bit more confidently here and played the Tireless Tracker instead, or even tried to play the Courser and get a bit lucky, hit a land off top, then hold a trophy for haul. So there are lots of lands here you could go for. I think the safest is just to play the Liliana, but with them just having two cards in hand, one of them being pretty much irrelevant, it was probably more correct to play the Tracker there. So we'll discard just an extra Tracker, not doing much. They'll discard their last land in hand. They play a second Hall of Storm Giants, and then here they have a Soul Shatter, which does get rid of our Liliana, which is, fine. However, on our turn, we do get to untap with the Siphoner, draw an extra card. We do hit our land, our fifth land, I should say, so we are able to swing in with the Siphoner, and then they just concede. So, thereafter we could have played the Tracker plus land, get a clue token, and then play an additional Siphoner, which just would have been most likely game ending. We had the trophy for their haul if they wanted to activate it. We even had the push for it, which would have been less mana efficient because it would cost 4 mana, but who cares? They conceded. So, in that match, we saw that Siphoner was just such an impactful card, really powerful against the control and Midrange matchups, like I said. We had other ways of pressuring our opponent with cards like Graveyard Trespasser, obviously being a really premier threat in our deck, and other cards that were, in our opponent's eyes, more impactful than the Siphoner, such as Tireless Tracker, and such as Liliana the Last Hope and Liliana the Veil. And so while our opponent was able to interact with us in that way of getting rid of our really big bombs in the form of those aforementioned cards, Siphoner was, just stayed on the board, got us damage in, and then got us card advantage in addition to that damage, and was just overall a very efficient card, very efficient threat. I've been loving Siphoner so far. I think she's great in this deck, and I hope you, kind of open up to Siphoner if you haven't already. And I hope you kind of see the logic behind Siphoner, Tracker, Liliana the Veil, even Liliana the Last Hope from watching this video. So with that being said, I really hope you enjoyed this video, a bit more informative, so I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you in the next one. Have a very nice day.